This is Colorado Matters from CPR News and KRCC. I'm Ryan Warner. Summer's been a scorcher in many parts of the state. Denver saw its first 100-degree day of the season earlier this month, July 9th. Meanwhile, wildfires rage, droughts plague. Are there any glimmers of hope? We'll ask Denver7 Chief Meteorologist Lisa Hidalgo in our regular climate and weather chat. Hi, Lisa.
Hi. Good to see you.
Indeed, that 100-degree day tied a record previously set for that date in 2022. That was just 3 years ago. Not a long stretch in between. What does that say about a warming planet, potentially?
I think it's tricky when you look at the day-to-day temperatures and try to equate that with climate change. When we're looking at climate change, it's more of a how is this changing slowly over time and gradually getting warmer. I mean, we are still going to see sub-freezing days, even with the planet warming. So I think it's tough to look at specific days, but actually it's been a fairly mild summer all in all.
These days stand out, though, and so we tend to apply them and think, it's been a scorcher.
It has. And, you look back in history, I think when you look at these days that get hot like this, we look at streaks, right? So far, the longest streak of 90-degree days that we've seen so far this summer has been a 6-day streak. We just came off of one this past weekend into this week. The longest streak of 90-degree plus days, 24 days in a row. Could you imagine that? That was back in 2012 and 2008. That would hurt. That would be painful. You would feel the difference there.
Right, this notion that there's just no relenting. When we look at summers over the long term, because again, climate change is something that you look at maybe from 10,000 feet as opposed to just day to day, we are seeing a warming trend overall, locally, globally.
We are, and I think it's interesting when you look at some of the data. We talk about these hot days. The hottest temperature ever recorded in Denver is 105 degrees. Now keep in mind, we've seen that 5 times on record. 4 of those were in the last 20 years. I think that gives you a better indication of just how much warmer it's gotten within, the past few decades.
Okay, the hottest it's ever gotten on record in Denver, 105.
Yep.
Now, Lisa used to be a meteorologist in Las Vegas, where that's the low.
Yeah, you're right. There are some nights, some mornings you would wake up thinking, did it even cool down at all? Yeah, Vegas, that's a completely different beast. You had stretches of, triple-digit days.
Now, we're heading into August. Is that our warmest month? I'm curious if those 105s came in August.
We had a few. Anytime really between mid-July and then into August. This is also that period you hear dog days of summer, which I think is also kind of a fun little tidbit. Would you like to hear?
I know the answer,
Oh,
but
you
I'm
do?
not going to be a know-it-all. I'm going to let you be the know-it-all.
I don't want to be the know-it-all. It dates back, ancient times when there is a star, Sirius, the dog star. At that time, they thought maybe that had something to do because it was the brightest in the sky at that time with the heat, but we know that's not really the case. But that's why they called it the dog days of summer.
Right, because Canis, what the name of the star in Latin is dog.
Yes, correct.
Yes, okay,
yes.
okay. On the subject of heat, I think of heat as going hand in hand with drought. Rain has been spotty at best. How's the state looking?
It was great in May. We had a lot. We had it was about 3.5 inches of rain in May. Since then, storms have been a little few and far between. Drought conditions, unfortunately, worsening. Western half of the state, not looking great. We've got now some extreme drought conditions. Actually, the eastern half, not looking bad. Still pretty drought-free at this point.
Do we tend to see that the western half of Colorado, I think of Mesa County and the dry high desert, is trending drier than the eastern side?
It depends. It really depends year to year. This year we had, and we've talked about this in the past, we had some rapid snowmelt. It happened a little bit earlier because we had such a warm spring. So that has unfortunately not helped the drought conditions there, where we would have had, some of that snowmelt a lot slower, and it would have kept things a little bit, a little more moist. Oh, you know how I love that word moist. But yes, it's pretty dry out there now. And that is pretty typical, though, for the western slope.
And all of this, then, the heat, the drought, seems to go hand in hand with wildfires. Those continue to burn in Colorado. What is your take on the risk moving forward?
The most recent drought monitor that was just released on Thursday, it is, again, worsening over the western half, areas where we've had those multiple wildfires burning so far this month. So at this point, it doesn't look good. I mean, many of these started by lightning, in fact. And so the rain is great. That's the problem with these thunderstorms. It's such a good news, bad news scenario. Rain is great. Obviously, you're going to get the thunder and the lightning with it, though, too. And that's what's been sparking a lot of these. So if it stays as dry as it has, that could be a huge threat.
Which makes me wonder, are there thunderstorms that are drier than others? In other words, might you get a relatively dry thunderstorm still with that pesky lightning?
100%. Now we're shifting, though, into more of a monsoon type of a flow where we tap into that subtropical moisture. It's a shift in the overall wind pattern. So we get more moisture coming up from the south, which helps because that gives us more rain. Here's where it doesn't help. It then creates more flooding. We've seen some flash flood concerns already this week, and that is a big concern. But it does help with the rain and the rain content.
I'm glad you brought up flooding. I'm not glad of flooding itself, certainly given what we saw that was so deadly in Texas. What is the nature of flash floods, currently versus historically? Are we particularly prone in Colorado to them?
It's so dependent on the terrain, and that changes so drastically, too, over the years. Think about how many areas just, say, 10 years ago, we had nothing on. There was no buildings, there was no concrete, it was just grass. And so when you had heavy rain, it would absorb, and it would go into the ground, and it'd create better groundwater resources. Now we're building in areas that maybe we didn't before, and so you now have a lot more runoff in locations. And it's so dependent. I mean, you look at the Texas flood. If that storm had hit, in any other spot, 50, 60 miles up, we may not have seen that kind of devastation. But when you have that much rain falling on top of a river, creating just some horrible conditions.
But this is interesting because you're talking about the impermeability of surfaces in our cities. Of course, there's also this cycle of fires burning that chars the earth. And there can be flash floods related then to fires.
Which we've been worried about this week. I mean, we've been looking up at some of the burn scars from fires within just the past few years, and it cannot soak in. I mean, it doesn't even have to be a lot of rain. It could be 1/10 of an inch to 1/4 of an inch of rain, which in Colorado is not a lot. But just that on that sort of surface and then that topography, it all collects, it races down, and then that's where we get some of the flash floods and the mudslides in the mountains.
Okay, I asked if there was a glimmer of hope in the introduction. We're not hearing it yet, and this next question isn't going to lead to it either. Research published in the journal Nature Geoscience suggests the so-called mega drought that has gripped the West may not end for decades. It's the worst spat of dry conditions in 12 centuries. Research points to a pattern of temperatures in the Pacific Ocean that are kind of stuck because of climate change. Mega drought. Is mega drought a word that makes it into your Denver7 forecasts?
I have not used it. I try to typically keep us in the 24-hour to 48-hour forecast zone, but I mean, it's true. I was reading that study. It was fascinating. They went into the earth. They cut into the core to look back at moisture content from previous years. And then it was relating that to, we talk about El Nino, La Nina, the oscillation in the Pacific, and it was relating that to those pattern changes and how we've seen over time less snow in winter, which is an interesting point because I was looking back at some of our data, and just in the time that I've been doing weather, our average annual snowfall in Denver has come down a couple of inches from what we report. It used to be closer to about 60 inches, now it's about 57 inches.
Just in the time you've witnessed.
Yep.
I mean, it is remarkable, I think, that even though we talk about climate change over long periods of time, when we look at what has changed in our own lifespans
right.
in the matter of years, these things are lasting longer than my relationships.
Well, that's another talk. Do we have enough time for that? Can we get into it?
Okay. I just want to go back to one idea, which is forecasting flash floods.
Yeah.
Because you mentioned if a storm is in this spot versus this spot, the effects can be incredibly different. How difficult is it to forecast flash floods and their effects?
It's really hard because you have to look at where, again, that storm is popping up. And Colorado is unique in the sense that I've talked about this before. Our storms typically pop up and then roll east versus we're not watching them for miles and miles and miles so that we could warn a town, say maybe that there's this monster rainstorm coming. But especially along the Front Range in the metro area, these storms will pop up, they hit hard, and then they move out. And so it is tricky. I think we can look at the atmosphere, the ingredients that make for heavy rain, for instance, the monsoon, plus then a cold front that we saw this week, and that will give us an idea that we've got the potential for some areas of heavy rain. Where exactly that heavy rain will be and how it's going to then react to, again, the topography, what it lands on, it's tricky.
Lisa, thank you.
Thank you. Always good.
Do you have a glimmer?
Always. It's going to be, listen, it's Colorado. It's beautiful. And we're going to go through these cycles. We are. But all in all, I think we have the best weather across the country.
I'd rather go through it here than anywhere.
Exactly.